Hi, this is Stephen, and this is Astro Indicator Update, Excursions into Practical Astrology, and this is episode 51. And today's date is Sunday, August 16th. So what are we looking at today? We'll briefly look at Kamala Harris's natal chart and her transits. I want to make a somewhat of a positive comment about this Pluto-Mercury combination that we have going on in the USA chart, which I've been talking about for 8 months, mostly in its negative aspects, which is quite apparent to me. But I'm going to point out there is a positive element to this, and potentially we can see this in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's chart, who was the author, the creator of Sherlock Holmes. We'll look at a little Bitcoin and banking news, and then we'll wrap up by analyzing the astrology of several markets that I normally examine. Okay, here's Kamala Harris's natal chart. She is a Libra, October 20th. And the thing that stands out to me most immediately is that she was born on a very exact full moon. Okay. In addition, it's part of this kind of a unusual triangle pattern that you see here in red, where you have two sesquiquadrate aspects, angles, with a square at the bottom between the asteroid Pallas Athena and Uranus. Okay. Well, this just makes this opposition even more pronounced because these planets are basically creating a midpoint emphasis here between the sun and the moon, which is very close. And anytime you have a full moon, you have people who are presenting qualities that often are quite contrasting. They're quite opposite in character. In this case, we have the sun in Libra. Some of the archetypes for Libra are, the peacemaker, someone who wants to keep things in balance, keep things harmonious, cooperative, likes, artistic, refined, etc. In contrast to that, we have someone who has, in this case, a moon in Aries, who can be very assertive, aggressive, likes to win, highly competitive, sort of militant in their orientation to the world, okay, ruled by Mars. Two extremes actually are being presented here, and there's an attempt by this personality to try to integrate these two opposing energies, and she has this in spades. Okay. In addition, she has a Gemini ascendant, and Geminis in general have contrasting qualities in their character. That's a stereotype of Gemini. And so there is a theme running through her natal chart of this duality of extremes trying to be coordinated and integrated. I think she leans in the direction of the more Mars-type energy. And I say this because the leading planet in her chart, the ruler of her chart, the ruler of Gemini, is Mercury. It is in Scorpio, conjunct her sun, a blending of these two energies. The ruler of Scorpio is Mars, the same ruler of the moon sign, Aries. So she has, I think, a little bit more Mars energy than someone who is a typical Libra, okay? Also, she has Saturn, top of her chart. She's an ambitious person. Top of her chart in trine to this conjunction of her sun and Mercury. Mars also is conjunct Vesta. And won't take a lot, it gets too complicated. I won't go into detail about Vesta, but Vesta symbolizes a number of different things. Maybe I could sum it up. There's emphasis on security with Vesta in many respects. And it just stands out in her background as a prosecutor who prosecuted, essentially locked up a lot of people in her profession, and locks are associated with Vesta. So had to throw that in. So anyway, she has a very interesting chart. So let's look at her transits, what are going on. Again, in a bi-wheel like this, we have our natal position exactly the same that we just looked at in the middle here. The planets where they were located last Tuesday when the announcement came out from Biden that she had been selected as his VP in the campaign. We're looking at this because that was the starting date of her, involvement in his presidential campaign. Okay, so what's going on in her transits? Well, she has a T-square to Saturn and Vesta, in addition to other things. Okay, actually she has a grand cross going on. So let me point that out to you, see if I can get my drawing things. So T-square looks like that. Okay, Saturn is 90 degrees from the sun. It is 90 degrees from the moon, 90 degrees from the sun. It still is right now. It's going to be lasting for months and months. And it was definitely very close on the announcement day. In addition, actually, it doesn't look exactly like a nice square, but we have a square between Vesta and the moon, and a square between Vesta and the sun. So she has a big grand cross going on here. Grand cross is actually something looks like that. Okay, let me kind of simplify things a little bit. So let's bring this back to this just briefly. Okay, just so we have something on the board. The T-square, you can kind of squeeze out a positive interpretation of this, to a certain extent. But the odds are quite low that this is positive for her or positive for Biden, okay? Because at the minimum, she is feeling a great deal of pressure and stress right now, okay? This would be happening to anybody when you have if you had just one of these aspects, Saturn squaring the moon, okay, which we have here, which is actually going on in Joe Biden's chart, which I've talked about in past videos. Okay, that is happening in Biden's chart. They both have Saturn squaring their moons, okay, which is amazing. So there's a great deal of stress, great deal of, sense of restriction and challenges emotionally happening in these two. In addition, basically they have a T-square going on between with Pluto, at least she does. Okay, so this is a completely intense time for her. Normally with people who would be going through this, they would be experiencing some loss in their life, highly frustrating, feeling like life is very difficult. A huge burden has been placed on her shoulders. This is not a auspicious energy for someone who is running, for president or for vice president. So this is going to last for a while. I didn't want to take the time to look at what was going on, next year for her, but things get more intense for her personally because Pluto, this planet right there, by transit, is moving forward and is going to be exact her sun most of the time, and squaring her sun, squaring her moon all of next year. very intense time for her. So, I can say, as I said earlier, possibly we can, wring out a positive interpretation of this, but it's difficult because just generally speaking, people, they're at a low point somehow emotionally, or they're struggling emotionally when this is going on. Okay, let's move on. A little bit more on the upside, because I've been concentrating, I don't get that many viewers, but for months, even going back to last December, I said this was going to be a really difficult, challenging, crisis-like year for the United States because the U.S. has a Pluto opposite Mercury aspect in its chart. And I've talked about the manipulation of the media and, deep shadow government, corruption surfacing and so forth, represented by that aspect. However, it just kind of dawned on me that there could be at least some positive manifestations evident in the world today of this combination of energies. And one of them, when you kind of seems to be presented in Arthur Conan Doyle's astrology. He was the creator of the Sherlock Holmes, books. And Sherlock Holmes, everybody knows Sherlock Holmes. And so what was he renowned? What was he famous for? He was famous for being very intelligent, looking at the evidence very critically, objectively, digging for the truth. He, I think, expressed Conan Doyle's strong emphasis of Pluto and Mercury. Here is a conjunction of Pluto and Mercury in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's chart, which is actually in a T-square relationship, which I was just talking about, which makes it even more emphasized in his chart. And so I think this guy, he had issues. He had some, his own dark side to deal with, but he was able to, create someone who expressed that energy as an extension of himself, and it was his creation, that expressed an energy in a more positive way. I mean, Sherlock Holmes wasn't perfect. You read the books. I mean, he was a cocaine addict and, very, condescending and arrogant and so forth at times, but he utilized his gift to, the betterment of the world. Well, why am I bringing all this up? So I said Sherlock Holmes' behavior wasn't exemplary, but he excelled as a detective, doggedly searching for the truth. Well, our Pluto-Mercury opposition in the U.S. chart, there is one manifestation of that going on, and it seems to be growing, and I think it's beneficial to the world, is that we have more and more people acting as detectives, more and more people thinking critically for themselves. And many of them are expressing this as being as independent journalists in social media who are trying to, discern the truth, do their own research and educate the world. And of course, you get people of all stripes in, doing this. But I think on balance, on the whole, this is a plus and has been very helpful for people understanding what's going on, particularly when you can't get the truth from the mainstream media these days. So anyway, I want to point that out because you can express some of these challenging energies in a positive way, even though it takes some willpower at times and some real conscious awareness to direct things in that way. Okay, here's some news. Sort of interesting news on a number of levels, but over the last couple months, number of large companies have been buying a lot of Bitcoin. Most recently, just this past week, a company called MicroStrategies buys $250 million of Bitcoin, calling the crypto superior to cash. So the quote here is, "This investment reflects our belief that Bitcoin, as the world's most widely adopted cryptocurrency, is a dependable store of value and attractive investment asset with more long-term appreciation potential than holding cash." Well, that's a big shot in the arm for, another sign of huge adoption taking place with cryptos and Bitcoin in particular. Now, I know nothing about MicroStrategy, and I'm a little suspicious. They're a publicly traded business intelligence firm. Okay, what in the heck does that mean, a business intelligence firm? So anyway, if you want to make a comment and you can do some homework on MicroStrategy, you can inform me. Well, over here, this article is about Grayscale, which is a publicly traded fund that allows you to buy Bitcoin or Ethereum or other cryptos, much more easily by buying their funds. And I've talked about Grayscale in the past. Well, anyway, to back up their trading, they buy Bitcoin. They own Bitcoin, and they buy a huge amount of it. So here, they bought more Bitcoin than the miners were generating. And again, it just spells out that Bitcoin, because it has a hard cap on the amount that will ever be produced, is a item that is becoming exceedingly and increasingly scarce in the world, and will so. And the fact that we're having increasing adoption on top of that means that strongly points to the idea that its value will continue going up. So just wanted to point that out. And then this is an article that I'm going to read a little bit here. Be patient with me, because I think this was a very important article. And you might have to note, if you want to go look at it, get your pen and paper out, because this is another article by Alistair McLeod, and he works for goldmoney.com. So if you go to goldmoney.com and go to research, you can find this article and read the whole thing. So these 2 pages, I got the beginning of the article here, the end of the article here. Let me read this, because he is pointing out that the coronavirus and the riots and all this business is could be construed as possibly intentional distraction to what is really going on with our economy. I mean, we know that the middle class, small businesses have been taking this, gigantic hit. And from an outside observer standpoint, this just looks like intentional economic suicide to me. But what could be happening down the line? And he is pointing out that the banks who were in trouble prior to, the pandemic, going back last fall, there were major signs that there was problems. But let's read this. Okay. Downturns in bank credit expansion always lead to systemic problems. We are on the edge of such a downturn, which, thanks to everyone's focus on the coronavirus, is unexpected. We can now identify the 23rd of March as the date when markets stopped worrying about deflation and realized that monetary inflation is the certain outlook. That day, the Fed promised unlimited monetary stimulus for both consumers and businesses, and the dollar began to fall. The commercial banks everywhere are massively leveraged, and their exposure to bad debts and a cyclical banking crisis is now certain to wipe out many of them. In this article, we look at the globally systemic important banks, this is the abbreviation for that, as proxy for all commercial banks, and identify the ones most at risk on a market-based analysis. Let's just read one more paragraph. If these banks fail, then it seems logical that lesser banks will also fail. Any state which has a globally significant bank failure must therefore be prepared at the outset to underwrite its whole banking system. It will most probably turn into a wider problem, with a result that the global banking system will fall into the hands of major governments. Okay. Essentially, this has, or initially, the inflationary implications can only be guessed at. How the crisis affects economic prospects and undermines financial assets will feed into these guesses. But when banks are owned and controlled by the state, the impediment of the bank credit cycle to inflationary input will be replaced by the direction of central bankers and treasury ministers. Global monetary inflation to buy off a gathering slump will become unhindered and unprecedented. So many of these global systemically important banks, many of them, most of them, let's say the top 6 or so, are not in the U.S. They're actually in Europe, they're in China, and then you get into some in the U.S. But all these banks are connected. And people are defaulting right and left on their ability to pay rent, mortgages, and so forth. And this, you just start going upstream, and you're going to hit banks that have that are not in good financial shape. And so the next shoe to drop could be a major bank. And so he is outlining here how he sees things playing out. It's well worth reading. Okay, let's look at quickly get through this. This is getting too long, but let's look at our astrology. If you've ever been to this site, the vertical lines are astrological key dates for this particular market that I think have usually indicate important price moves. Dow Jones Industrials, big, huge triangle, which we've broken above. If I had the S&P chart, you would see sort of a similar move, but actually the S&P 500 would be hitting its all-time highs. The Dow Jones is hitting, this is a resistance level where you see my cursor right now. We have a fairly important date coming up on August 21st, which could have this market breaking above this resistance level, and the market then testing its old all-time highs. So this market is very manipulated. And the caveat here is that we're going through the weakest month seasonally for the Dow Jones and for all the indexes. But we do have this one bullish date coming up on the 20th and the 21st, basically. And then we have kind of a lull until the end of September. So we could hit a high here. I don't trust it, though. And it could be a fake breakout just because September is traditionally, historically, a weak month. So put that on your calendar. Okay, let's look at gold. Gold had its, for weeks, I've been talking about a gold pullback, a silver pullback. Well, we had it. It was quite impressive, the pullback. It happened mostly last Tuesday. But coming up, and so it came down. If you go back to my chart, my video a couple weeks ago, I said, well, this would be the first level that a pullback right here. And we talked briefly about your options, what you could do to protect yourself, and there are many things you can do. Well, we came back further. We came back down to this support level, and this can be considered what's called in technical analysis a back test. This is a healthy thing, actually, because we were way overbought in the momentum indicators. As you can see down here, RSI, MACD below that. Momentum indicators, overbought, comes down, oversold. We needed to have a pullback. Now, normally, when you get a big correction, you trade sideways for several weeks, maybe, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. It's called a consolidation phase. It takes many forms. It's impossible to know what this pattern is at this time. Now, what's make a little bit confusing is that we have some strong astrology dates coming up, which normally support higher prices. And, we have one on the 17th, which is tomorrow. Okay, and this is sort of a rare one. Doesn't happen all that often. So something could happen, and it's followed up on the 23rd, 24th by additional ones. I could have actually drawn in a couple more lines around from the 23rd to the 25th, but it just makes it too confusing. So, will the technical expectation of trading sideways for a while, will that traders expectation override the astrology, or will the astrology surprise people, and we may have large bounces in this upcoming week? I sort of lean to the latter, but I like to combine the technical analysis with the astrology, with the fundamentals, and it is an art to try to see which one is going to be the strongest at any particular time. Okay, here's the silver chart. Big downturn, and in silver, it has its own separate astrology, but silver also has some very grade A, as I like to call them, astrology dates approaching. They're coming up on, there's sort of actually a minor one tomorrow, which I did not draw in. But then there's one on the 20th, which is stronger. And there's one on the 23rd. That is fairly strong. I think the one on the 20th is more strong. Now, when we get out to the here we go. The 28th, actually, this green line is the 28th. This green line typically has a lot of volatility associated with the astrology that's going on, has a lot of unpredictability. So we could go higher, and then we could get another possible dump on the 28th. So be wary of that. Okay. Now, I have a website. My website is listed at the end of this video. I go into comments on the website as well if you want more comments. So here's Bitcoin. Bitcoin is forming sort of a wedge pattern, or a bullish triangle. It's kind of in between, and we need to break out of that, and then we'll go higher. And this is the advantage of the astrologies. I can look ahead and I can see that we do have something strong happening. Let's see, basically on the 21st of August. And when is the 21st? 17th. So I think that's Friday. Is that right? So, we may end up trading sideways until we get out to that date before we break out. But this is my, I would put the odds, at 80% that that's the date when that may happen. And so I'm going to hang in there, because I see this as actually a healthy trading pattern. We had a pop up and now trading sideways. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm looking at later in the week for a stronger move to happen in Bitcoin. Okay, here's Ethereum's chart, and let me look at my notes for Ethereum, and I have also an extra comment to make on Ethereum. Now, Ethereum made a move with no astrology happening either in Bitcoin, because there's intermarket influence between Bitcoin and Ethereum. But my, explanation for this is that Ethereum is really the basis, the platform that many of what's called decentralized finance technology and coins. Many of those functions are based upon Ethereum, and those DeFi, decentralized finance coins, are just, there's a huge mania happening in the crypto world, and just there's a number of influences on Ethereum besides Bitcoin right now, and so it does not surprise me that Bitcoin has just got a lot of momentum. There's a number of issues with Ethereum right now. I mean, it's getting more costly to make transactions. They really need to upgrade. But let's stick with the astrology. On the astrology side of things, Ethereum has a very strong date coming up just coincidentally on the 21st as well. So I see a continuation here with Ethereum. Okay, now I'm going to make a comment about Grayscale. Going back, I was talking about Grayscale, just bought a lot of Bitcoin. They have these two main funds, one Bitcoin fund, one Ethereum fund that your broker, you can get through your broker. The Bitcoin Grayscale fund somewhat closely reflects Bitcoin's price trading. It's been on a rally, okay? Well, this is a market that's in an uptrend too. Ethereum is in an uptrend too, correct? You can see that. Well, imprint this shape of this chart in your mind right now, and let's look at Grayscale's Ethereum fund. Okay, this is Grayscale's, oops, I spelled it wrong, Grayscale's Ethereum Trust Fund, and it doesn't look like Ethereum's pricing at all, okay? I don't know what's going on with this fund. If anybody knows, or if it has an explanation for me, make a comment. But I would steer clear of this fund and start until it starts reflecting what's going on in Ethereum, okay? Okay, we'll wrap up here. We'll look at the U.S. dollar because a lot of things are affecting our lives, but based upon what the value of the dollar is. Inflation, is essentially what happens at the grocery store and so forth, is a reflection of what's going on with the dollar as a reserve currency in relation to other currencies. And for a number of weeks, I've been saying the astrology, it is not responding to the astrology. Even when I had bullish astrology dates, the market was heading lower. And so just like any market responding to some, related news item, you can then glean how strong or how weak that market might be. This market is signaling that it's very weak, and this has been going on for several months. And we got down to a point, a little bit oversold here, momentum indicators. We were due for a bounce. We didn't get it here, and it doesn't look like we're getting it here. Okay, normally I have sort of a 1 or 2 day window where I evaluate the astrology and I can see what's going on. It almost really looks like, the dollar's heading down again, and I don't really see something too strong. I mean, potentially we may get a bounce here on the 28th of August or mid-September, which is not drawn in here. But until then, my guess would be is that we're heading down, and that may be inversely reflected in the precious metals going up. So that's it for now. Again, my name is Stephen. I have a master's degree in psychology. I've been studying astrology since I was a teenager and applying it to financial markets for 25 years. I do, particularly in this market, promote sound money, whether you're talking about precious metals or Bitcoin. This is my email address if you have a question. This is my website with the same information. You can get it much more quickly. You don't have to listen to other, maybe some more of the astrology stuff that you may not be or may be interested in. But the key dates are listed at this website. And I do accept donations if you feel generous. And also, please hit the like button, share this video, consider subscribing. I'm sort of on a shift in my schedule. I'm going to be doing this, I think, more often on a every 2-week basis on Sunday. And if you have suggestions, if you want want me to look at somebody's astrology, you can put that in the comment section. But also consider subscribing, because every now and then I might come back to the weekly podcast. So anyway, thank you for listening, and that's it for now. And we'll see you probably in a couple weeks.